Fans of Nickel State sports will remember Darin Fontz. Let's hear about his days covering the Colonels and working on Green Street. How are you doing today, Darin?
Great, William. How's it going?
Very well. Well, let's start from the beginning. Are you from our area originally?
No, I'm not. Originally, I'm from Kentwood, Louisiana, on the North Shore area, close to Mississippi. And moved down this way in the late 80s, and I've been here ever since.
All righty. Well, let me ask the question I've asked a lot of people so far. Growing up, was broadcasting always an interest of yours?
I was always interested in the fact that, there were certain broadcasters I liked to hear more than others, and when it got to the point where I knew a sports career after high school wasn't possible in the, playing field and so on, I did become interested in doing play-by-play sports, and I was very fortunate after I graduated high school to hook up with a local station near Kentwood in Amite, Louisiana, WABL. It was a 500-watt station, still on the air in Amite. And after I graduated high school, I got a summer job that was a part-time job that quickly turned into a 5 to 7 day a week job, even though it was still part-time. And they ended up having an interest in doing some sports, and that's kind of what really got me going. I was doing Amite High School football as I worked my way through college at Southeastern Louisiana University, and had a chance to do Amite High football, who at that time was one of the most successful AAA programs in the state, and got to travel all over the state during the playoffs and doing high school football, and did a few basketball and baseball games as well. But that was really my first entry into the field of broadcasting, and I fell in love with it and ended up down here in Thibodaux with Nickel State.
Now, when you went to SLU, was broadcasting your degree program?
It sure was. I was a communications major, but the communications department was just kind of getting off the ground at the time. They did have a student radio station there, but unfortunately, that was during the mid-'80s was when Southeastern dropped their football program. My freshman year was their last year of football, so there wasn't an opportunity to kind of, get your foot in the door doing Southeastern football because the program no longer existed. Shortly after that, the basketball program went on probation and was given the death penalty by the NCAA. So baseball was about all we had at Southeastern at that time. The local on-campus station was professionally run. There was very little student involvement with it. It was a public a public station, so there was not a lot of interaction with communications majors. So the only opportunity I really had was my job in Amite, and after I got my communications degree from Southeastern, that's when the opening came when Roy Pugh left in, I believe it was 89.
Mm-hmm. So how did you first find out about the KTIB opening?
Well, the funny thing is, a good friend of mine who lives in LaPlace now was a Nickel State student, and he was a manager of basketball and football, and he got to know Roy Pugh real well. And before I had ever heard of KTIB, he would, he was interested in broadcasting, so we talked about my high school games up in the Amite area, and he always mentioned Roy Pugh, and he did a great Roy Pugh impression, So I'd heard of Roy Pugh before I ever knew of KTIB or anything, just from his imitating Roy. And when I told him that I'd read in the, I believe it was one of the papers, the Picayune or the Morning Advocate, that they had an opening for a program director, I asked him about it. I said, look, isn't it the station that Roy Pugh was working at? And he says, yeah, man, you ought to give him a call. That would be a great job to have doing Nickel sports. So that's kind of what got me into it. I applied in 1998 for the program director job that came open in the summer of 98. And I didn't get the job, but they kept my name on file, luckily, and later in the year I was hired to do sports.
Wow, pretty exciting. So you come over here to Thibodaux. What are your first impressions of the area?
Well, it's funny you mention that because my first trip to Thibodaux, I didn't know how to get to Thibodaux from where I lived. I had to get directions from my friend, and I got lost in Des Allemands, made my way down Highway 1, and of course, back then, you had to go through, they didn't have the road highway bridge system that they have now, so you had to go through LaPlace, down Airline, through Destrehan subdivision, across the river. It took me 2 hours 2.5, 3 hours to get here. And when I was coming down Highway 1, all I saw was, houses along the side of the road, but nothing else, and I'm like, man, this is wild. I had, I lived in the country myself, but I'd never been in this type of area before. And, I got down here and wasn't sure if this is where I really wanted to be. But once I made the decision to move down here in late 1989, I haven't regretted a moment of it. I love it down here now.
Well, I know also when you're here at KTIB, you worked with a lot of good folks, and we want to mention some of them right now. Tell us about when you first met Mr. Sadie.
Mr. Sadie, I had the, of course, he and Marie Bergeron interviewed me twice. The first time for the program director's job, which, I'm fresh out of college, didn't realize I was grossly underqualified for. But fortunately, they kept my name on file, and when Roy left later in the year, they gave me a call. I think they were just desperate. Steve Calderera did the play-by-play for that football season after Roy left, but of course Steve has his own business, so he couldn't get away to do basketball games. So they were really desperate for somebody with some kind of sports experience. And they give me a call, and I come down here, and it was late October. They were looking for somebody pretty quickly, and Mr. Sadie, if you've ever met him, could be quite intimidating the first time you meet him. And, we hit it off pretty well. I think the thing that caught his attention with me was that I happened to have an audio tape of me doing high school football, aiming high against Edie White, and he heard me pronounce some of the Cajun names on the Edie White team, and that kind of sealed the deal, and that's when I started and stayed for the next 8 or 9 years.
And also, you just mentioned Marie. I'm sure all the years you were here, it was a pretty good delight to work with her as well.
Oh, yes, Marie. I miss Marie to this day. I wish I could see her again. I know I'm right here in town. But, yeah, Marie was our station manager, and, we saw her on a daily basis, and just a joy to work with, as were most of the people that came through there. Jacqueline Brinkley, and, I can name others, Roy Vignair. They were all great to work with and great professionals.
Well, let's talk about all the games that you covered, and we obviously won't have time to talk about all of them, especially football and basketball you covered for a long time. My memory's right. You had some pretty good people working with you on the air for those sporting events, correct?
Yeah, I was fortunate. One of the problems that I did come across was finding someone who would do the color commentary with me. Fortunately, I was able to get David Lowry to help me for most of my career there. And David was the one I mentioned earlier who put me onto the job. He was a manager of sports at Nichols, and I met him at Southeastern. After he left Nichols, he went to Southeastern, and he's the one that was very interested in sports. He had a good knowledge of sports, and he wanted to learn more. And he kind of broke in with me down here, and we stayed together through my career. And he actually went ahead and did some play-by-play himself in another over on the on the River Parish area. So he took his experience and went. But David was the main one. Roy Pugh stayed in town for a while, and Roy was fortunate when he went to work at Nichols. Of course, he made some of the road trips with us out of state to Connecticut and Georgia and so on. And he was able to join me in the booth and provide some color commentary, too. So, I was fortunate to have some good people to work with on the air doing sports.
Well, now, the years you covered, especially Nichols football, first off, the one of the most successful parts of that stretch was when Darin Barbier was coach.
Correct.
And tell us about one game I want you to tell us that was it seemed to be pretty memorable. I think you said it was the last regular season game of '96 against McNeese?
Yes, yeah. Of course, Darin Barbier came in with no head coaching experience on the college level, but a very successful high school career at Hornville, taking over for Rick Rhodes. And Rick Rhodes had some lean years, but he seemed to be getting the program turned around. But Darin Barbier came in, and 1996 was like a Cinderella year. Everything fell into place for Nichols. They had no major injuries. They won pretty much all of their close games. They went 8-3 on the season. They defeated Northwestern at home by blocking a punt that set up a field goal. And, everything fell into place for them, and it came down to the last game of the year. They had to travel to McNeese, and at the time, McNeese was a top 10 program. They had just started to make their big strides under Bobby Kiesler. That was in the middle of his era, so they were one of the top 10 teams in 1AA football. Go over there to McNeese, and it was a war. I can remember Brad Zeller was the quarterback out of Letcher. He was only a freshman or sophomore at the time. And Nichols, I believe, was trailing 16-10 with a minute or so, a couple of minutes left to go in the game. And Zeller engineered a touchdown drive to wrap up what many thought would be a playoff berth, and it turns out it did in the 1AA playoffs. It had been about 10 years, I believe, 86 or 87 since in Sonny Jackson's days that Nichols had actually made it to the playoffs in football. And even, since Phil Greco's first couple of years there, the winning seasons had been few and far between. So that was really, like I said, a Cinderella season. And Brad Zeller, I believe, I still remember today, it was a quarterback draw that he ran with just seconds left on the clock. And Adam Deal added an extra point for a 17-16 win over McNeese to finish 8-3. And at the same time, they needed some help, and that help came earlier in the day as Northwestern State either defeated Stephen F. Austin or lost to Stephen F. Austin. Whatever the outcome of that game was, it was what Nichols needed, to pretty much seal the deal on the postseason play.
And I believe it was the following week you had the pleasure of freezing to death in Montana.
Oh, Montana, yes. Freezing cold temperatures and against a very good football team that was used to that type of climate. And it was a long afternoon for Nichols, but I'm sure a memorable day for Nichols fans and for, the players on that team. There were some great players on that team and some good guys as well.
And also to let everybody know, the interesting thing about Darin Barbier's second season was that was the only second time in Division 1A history that a team went from being winless the previous year to winning 8 games to second.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That was his second year. And, after that struggle during his first year, there were a lot of doubts about whether the right decision had been made to hire Darin Barbier, but he had a great staff. He picked up some local high school head coaches to come join his staff, and he mixed them in with some experienced collegiate level coaches as well. Manny Michel and those guys did a great job with Nichols State while they were there. And, it was just a great coaching job, and they got the most out of their talent that year.
Now, of course, we don't want to forget about basketball, and for a good long time, Ricky Broussard led a Nichols men's program that really had a lot of success, including, I believe, with a few conference championships, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they won 2 Southland Conference titles, 2 tournament titles, and made 2 NCAA appearances. Ricky Broussard's resurrection of the Nichols State program was one of the better coaching jobs I've seen. He took a program that, was at the bottom. It had fallen out, and he came in and in a matter of years, built respect with the program and then finally got over the hump in, I believe it was 93 or 93, and with Gerard King and Reggie Jackson and Ray Washington and that group, won the Southland Conference, finished 24-5 that year, and really, brought interest back into the program. The attendance was sagging, and people just had no interest in Nichols State basketball. And Ricky Broussard, being a South Louisiana guy, he was he was good in dealing with the public. He liked to mingle with people, and I think he took a page out of Dale Brown's book. He just kind of got out there and met as many people as he could, and it really helped to turn his program around. They played Virginia in the first round of 93 and lost, and then played the defending national champions in 96 and lost to Arizona out in Sacramento. So those were 2 memorable games I'll never forget.
And while we're on the subject of Nichols as well, I'm sure you probably had a few memorable moments covering baseball.
Baseball, yes. Mike Knight had an outstanding program at the time. We made one trip to the regionals up in Starkville, Mississippi. And under Jamie Pizzolata, they really had, I'm thinking they had about a 500 record that year, but really started playing well down the stretch, won the Southland Conference tournament, and got into the regional in Baton Rouge. Unfortunately, they never were able to pull out any victories, but they were very competitive and a lot of fun to be around.
Now, not to be too particular, but I know another thing that you covered pretty well was high school sports, and I'm sure you have countless memories there of all the various teams that you followed at the time.
Oh yeah. One of the things that I didn't do a whole lot of play-by-play, but I went to a lot of the games, and doing nickels on the weekends, it made it tough for me sometimes to do high school, but I did do my share of high school games during the week and during that time period. And of course, that was the time period where Thibodeau High was at its peak under Dennis Lorio. They finally broke through. I believe it was in 91 or 90, somewhere in there, and won the state championship with some great teams. South Terrebonne was with David Butler, also won it that year. There were great teams and great players throughout this area. Terrebonne really had it rolling through that time period. And, of course, Edie White, where I'm at right now, has been constant in maintaining winning records, and, we're looking forward to trying to take it to the next level.
And I take it, did you leave KTIB to go to Edie White?
I sure did. What happened was I met my future wife in 1997, and one of the benefits, one of the things I really enjoyed about working at KTIB and doing sports was my being able to travel the country with Nichols and seeing different parts of the world I would never get to see otherwise. That was a blessing while I was working there, but when I met my fiancée and we decided to get married, she didn't think to travel was such a good idea. So I began looking to get into something a little more stable and something where travel was not a problem. And a coaching vacancy opened up at Edie White, and that was probably my second option for career going into college. My mother talked me out of it because she's a school teacher. She said, "Look, don't get into education. There's no money and it's a lot of headaches." So I didn't do it. I got into broadcasting, and I really enjoyed it. But I don't think I had the drive to really try to go big, to move into the larger markets. I felt very comfortable here in Thibodeau, and stayed here and played that out for as long as I could, and then got into coaching and teaching at Edie White, and I've loved it ever since. I certainly miss doing play-by-play, on occasion, but I still keep up with all the teams, and I'm a listener to KTIB on a regular basis. Whenever I get the chance, morning going to school, and in the evenings coming back, I try to see what's on the air and what's happening.
Well, very good. Well, listen, Darin Fontz, we greatly appreciate the time. And before we head out, is there anything you'd like to say to all our listeners?
Well, I'd just like to, as I work at KTIB, I got a chance to meet a lot of people. I spent time as sports director, news director, program director. At a station like KTIB, you got to be a jack of all trades and kind of cover your bases on everything. And I really had a chance to meet a lot of people from the business community who advertised with us, to the sports community I covered, and the political community that we covered in the news. Just a lot of great people. I worked with a lot of great people at KTIB. I want to thank Mr. Sadie and Marie for giving me a shot. In my younger years, I loved every minute of it, and I look forward to hopefully 50 more great years at KTIB.
Darin Fontz, a tremendous part of KTIB's coverage. The